So, good afternoon, everybody. I think we should get started, although this solves the difficulty after lunch, right? Everybody is still downstairs enjoying. But anyway, we've got, it's 12:30, so we get started. So, this is a kickoff of Track B, Tech and Business Trends. The topic for today is moving to a software-ready cloud. Do you have the right foundations? My name is Marien Keizer. I work at NLEX, and I'm going to be moderating this session. And with us we have Alastair and Bernard. So let me quickly introduce them to you. So Alastair has a long-standing career in product management with many different tech companies. So we're expecting a lot of tech knowledge from him. He's currently responsible for architecting the data center solutions within Commscope. And he's been very eminent. He's from Wales and not from England. So that's an important thing. Yeah, absolutely, that was clear. On this side we have Bernard Schep. He also has an extensive career, more in sales, but with all the major logos, Lucent, Cisco, Brocade, Huawei. And currently he is with Pluribus. And he's responsible for sales in Northern Europe. And Bernard, let's start with you. Pluribus, what does that stand for?
Yeah, Pluribus, the name was taken from the weapon seal of the United States, A Pluribus Unum. One out of many, that means. And we even took the other word from it to name our network management solution. It's called Unum. So it's very American. And Pluribus is really a network operating system supplier. We're a software development company who fires up open switches. So we are really at the heart of the disaggregated networking solutions. So you can combine hardware from different vendors like Dell, Celestica, and EdgeCore, and run it as what we call an adaptive cloud fabric as one homogeneous virtualized network infrastructure.
Cool, thank you very much. That's very interesting. Hey, Alastair, Commscope. This is again, Commscope. Sorry, this is going on all the time with preps. Commscope is a bit more known company. Can you tell us a bit about where Commscope is heading and what's something we might not know about Commscope?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, firstly, it's great to be in front of a live audience for the first time in 2 years. So for once, I'm seeing people beyond this. So I'm now understanding who's tall, who's short, and who has filters on. And the other thing with COVID over the last 2 years is I've been lucky enough, because I've been presenting on Teams, is to have a set of notes next to me, and that's something that I might need to depend on right now. But Commscope, as you know, is a very well-known company, firstly with the physical layer cabling, also so the Systemax brand, also with wireless technology as well. So if you think about the Andrew brand, if you go outside and look at RF transmitters, those big bass drums that are on the transmitter towers with the big red lightning flash, those would be Commscope as well. But what some people might not know is that prior to COVID, we acquired an organization called Aris. And Aris came along to us with network switching technology. It also came along with Ruckus Wi-Fi in-building technology as well. So now not only are we the physical layer, but we also have active devices as well. Some of the devices, maybe some of Pluribus technology will sit upon. Now what's coming for us is we're seeing a big change in the market in terms of sustainability. So that's a big thing within Commscope. It's a big initiative from the board level down, not only because the market is requesting it, but we also see it as responsibility of ourselves to have that as well. We manufacture our own products within Europe, and that means we have tight control of the supply chain. So we have ISO 14001 certification in place. So really a very, very large company, 30,000 people, $9 billion of revenue, many layers in the stack. So very, very interesting company at the moment.
Very good to hear. Hey, let's move to the topic of today, right? Moving to a software-ready cloud, do you have the right foundations? Well, that certainly will hit a couple of bingos in the time that we were still on Teams, right? Let's start with the foundations part. Alastair, what does that mean for you? What foundations would you relate to?
So, declaring my interest straight away, I'm in the data center portion of the business and the physical layer, the cabling, all the stuff that connects the servers and the switches together, all the stuff that connects out to the edge data center. So for me, the physical foundation is the cabling, it's the passive infrastructure, but the route foundation is a foundation that's able to support future generations of network speed, network growth, network needs in terms of, for example, automation, which I'm sure you'll come on to in a little bit more time. So if you think about a house, when you build a house, you want that house, you have a mortgage for 30 years or even more now in the UK, you want that house to last, right? You need that investment to last. So when I think about foundations, I think about a house, but I also think about the physical layer cabling. You have to have, whether it be copper or whether it be fiber, something that's able to sustain the evolution of different technologies, 400 gig, 800 gig, 1.6 terabytes.
But database bound for you, right?
Well, data bound, yeah.
Yeah, but also, data center bound. So
sorry, data center bound, that's right, yeah.
Okay, cool. And does that go for Pluribus as well? I think
Yeah,
you're more looking at...
we live fundamentally in the same world, and we look at the same foundation. We look at technology as something that enables currently 10 gig, 40 gig, 100 gig. We also have a solution supporting 400 gig and the higher capacities that are becoming available on the hardware side of things. And still, we look at that from the perspective of network function virtualization. What we offer in terms of network services and automation is very similar to what you would see on the server storage side of a data center, where functions are being put in containers. We offer similar services from the network perspective. So the foundation is really flexible software that runs on different hardware platforms, on different speeds. And each year we're adding features which make network slicing easier, makes provisioning easier, and more integrates the network functions, the backbone functions, into the whole data center infrastructure.
I was going to say, I think this is really interesting because I think for a long time, the people that you've been talking to with software have been different decision makers to the ones that we've been talking to in physical layer. And I don't know how you feel, but I see those two worlds colliding now because the IT departments are expecting more of their public network infrastructure. You talk about network slicing. Also the cloud and the hyperscalers, they're looking at more being drawn from their resources as well. And I see those two worlds colliding and those people coming together and talking because now we have to have this orchestration that both areas have to work together. Would you agree?
Absolutely. It's crucially important that every element, independent of how physical it is, has to be software defined and software controlled. And by separating this control layer from the data plane, in the way we do that, really gives you a lot of flexibility to choose the underlying hardware, which is particularly important in the current market where the availability of kit is really a problem for many projects.
But would that mean for you, Bernard, that for you the underlay doesn't really matter? So where Alastair focus on the underlay, you're basically saying, I don't really care about the underlay, I can just deliver my software over it, and there it goes?
Yeah, that's not entirely true, because the underlay should be capable of carrying those big streams of data at very low latency, and it goes faster and faster, and you're not prepared to rip and replace every 3 years your physical infrastructure, because there's a lot to do with that. It's far easier to upgrade the switch than to rip it out and put a new one in.
And I was just thinking as you were talking, if you have a software-defined network or some vision of that, some installation of that, think about how quickly you can change what you're doing via software. It can be a keystroke, right? But to actually go out, and we've worked with organizations looking at efficiency and how to improve efficiency in their data center, and time again, it's the human element of actually going out and inspecting the physical layer, the physical products. Are they there? Are they available? That's the challenge. So that's why, coming back to the foundation question, have the right foundation in place, because if you don't, these guys, these clever guys, can make a change at the stroke of a tap of a button, but it's a different matter. The implications of that can be far-reaching in the physical area.
Okay, so is that just a matter of timing? Because basically how you sketch it is, you put the hardware in the ground, you got the cabling ready in the building, you run the software over it, and we're all happy?
Well, I wouldn't say that because we're evolving further up the stack. They're evolving. You know, when you put some of the hardest things to do are to actually put the physical infrastructure in. Once they're in, right, they're fixed. Okay, whatever you do on top, that's great, but they're fixed. So having that right physical architecture is extremely important to be able to support what's going to go on in the future. Absolutely.
Yeah, but I understand for you, Bernard, that you said that you don't really mind which infrastructure is underneath. I get that you need the right amount of speed, that I understand. But at the end of the day, your story seems to be, I don't care what kind of hardware there is, we'll just run the software anyway, right?
Yeah, that's not entirely true. We need to heavily integrate with the hardware vendors that we use. We have very tight relationships with Broadcom as the network processor provider. And we only can provide those speeds and feeds by means of very competent hardware and a full-fledged software API towards this silicon in order to run a higher speed, very feature-rich network function virtualization. So we are very dependent on what Broadcom is doing. And in our market, we've seen the results of that. Our main competitor is a company called Cumulus, and they were acquired by Mellanox, which was also being acquired by NVIDIA. And then when this happened, Broadcom recognized them to be now part of their biggest competitor, so they decided to separate completely, which makes the product that Cumulus had available only on native Mellanox boxes and no longer on the Dell and the EdgeCore and the Celestica and Delta boxes that were built on this Broadcom chipset. So there's a hefty relationship between hardware and software.
So straight away, I mean, the alarm bells are ringing for me because what you've described is what we see, mergers and acquisitions, people out here having to make choices, I wouldn't say on the fly, but you can see that cycle is very, very rapid. So having a fixed physical infrastructure in place, that's a challenge. If things on top of it are changing so rapidly, as you say, and I believe that they are, then you really need to plan what you're going to put into your data center or what you're going to put into your public network right out to the 5G tower ahead of time to be prepared for anything, I'd say.
Yeah, but I would say that this is a further testimony to the advantages of separating software from hardware. Because I've seen customers, big internet exchanges, buy proprietary kit from one of the big brands with the idea to move into 100 gig and 400 gig, and 6 weeks later they've been told that it has been dropped from the roadmap for that particular product. And in the case of disaggregated cloud services on networking, server, and storage, if you separate the hardware from the software, if your software vendor fails, you can choose another one. If your hardware vendor fails, you have alternatives. Also, the software vendors typically also support pre-owned kit. We still deliver new features for boxes that were put on the market 5 years ago. And that's also something you don't see from proprietary vendors. They put a switch on the market or a router on the market, and the feature set that's on it, that's pretty much it. Yeah. If you need a new product, you need new hardware. And if you tightly couple that, you have a lot less flexibility in case of emergency, like you being acquired.
Yeah. Okay, that's an interesting take. Thank you very much, Bernard. Quick other question, because the other buzzword that's obviously in our topic is cloud. Many interpretations on that particular term. Let me just ask you, it seems that we're just going to move all to Azure and AWS. So once that's done, what's in it for you guys?
Now, for us, it's a real opportunity to basically extend that cloud into your private infrastructure. For us, public cloud services and private cloud services, they're just at the other end as a virtual network interface, the other end of the physical network interface. So we don't mind if you want to run your jobs at the public cloud. It's as easy reachable as it is your private cloud.
So you effectively then talk about the connectivity towards the cloud, whether it's public or private. Yeah, it doesn't really matter for you.
We provide for the virtualized broad lanes towards any kind of app serving platform. That's how we see it.
But isn't that these hyperscalers of these big brands run their own software and their own hardware? Or are you still supporting those as well?
They do, but we concentrate on the data centers that are still privately owned, and we provide for the connectivity from those to those.
Okay.
Effectively, we create a marketplace from which every service provider who's housing at the data center is reachable.
I get that. I just see a big consolidation in that industry going on, and I haven't seen it stop yet.
No.
So I was just wondering, we all hope it stops at some point, because I think, having two parties at the end of the time is not where you want to be. But at the moment, we just see that consolidation ongoing. So I was just wondering how your take is on that, given that by what I take is you look for independent data centers and you support those. How do you see that forward with all consolidation going on? Alastair, you want to take it on?
Well, it's an interesting point. Let me just get a glass of water here a moment. Oh, well, cloud is a huge topic for us. As you can imagine, I was describing to you earlier where Commscope is playing. So whether it's the public network, whether it's the private network, whether it's the hyperscalers, there's a lot going on. So cloud for us, obviously the hyperscalers, obviously the cloud providers. We're also seeing a lot of private organizations developing their own cloud. So some information that they have, they're not prepared to outsource that to, let's say, AWS or Azure. They maybe don't believe that they have the performance, or they don't want to have their data shared on, maybe sensitive data, if you're a government, shared on the same platform as Alastair Waite Industries, for example. They want to have their own devices. So they're setting up their own cloud instances, and I've seen this with banks, because their customers now expect the kind of performance that they get from Google or Facebook. They want to see that from their bank, from their local government. So we see that a lot. If you look further, cloud is also touching the switch telecom network as well. So Deutsche Telekom, British Telecom. I saw recently in the news that British Telecom and Google had signed an agreement for a cloud development going forward. So if you look at that, it's touching that area. IoT, that's huge. The consequences, okay, there is consolidation, so we can see it towards the big four US tech giants. They are absolutely dominating, but I think cloud is a very, very broad subject. I see manufacturing organizations deploying their own cloud. So the challenges we see is our customers keeping up with that, because IoT devices on their own don't actually generate a lot of data. But once you have 35 billion of those things out there at the edge of a network coming together, it's a bit like a tsunami. That wave of data is coming back, so it hits your network edge, where I know that you guys are playing at 5G network. Then that has to come back to maybe an MTDC, where that's hosting an edge instance, and then it comes back to a core data center somewhere as well. And the consequence of that, and I touched on this earlier, is that we're seeing faster and faster data rates within the data center fabric. As organizations like Google, Facebook, Microsoft, anybody in cloud is data mining. So AI, ML, that is consuming a lot of data traffic and driving bandwidth. And that's what we see happening, and that's what we see our customers talking to us about as well.
Yeah, I think I can agree to that one.
I also want to point out a couple of aspects to this, which are really incubators for the disaggregated marketplace. It's Facebook who actually started, together with Google and Andy van Bechtelsheim, the Open Compute platform. And that's really unprecedented, to publish blueprints of hardware to allow contract manufacturers to produce servers and storage and networking hardware such that it can be used in those hyperscaler data centers, but it can now also be used in the open market. Because we use the same hardware that Facebook had contract manufactured. So we run on the Wedge 100, which they use, which allows us to develop features at a very low price, good economy, available for the open market.
And I would say personally that Facebook's OCP initiative has really unleashed the cloud market, because they gave away the secret source. Yeah. And you can find it in detail. And it's interesting then, as you move to different customers who want to have AI or ML, you can see the same three-tier cluster network, switching networks being deployed. I come back to that challenge again. It's the physical infrastructure, having the right contention ratio, having the right number of fibers connecting those, and we see densification then in terms of fibers. And then that starts to cause issues with physical things like ducting size, because once you put a duct between buildings or between a wall, it's physically there forever. You can't change that with a keystroke. You have to have techniques and products then that can maximize the capacity that those tubes can handle. So it's a real headache. You've got to plan for it and do it right first time.
Yeah, no, I fully understand that that's the physical limitations of building. I was just curious about what both of you told about Facebook opening up its secret sauce, as you call it. If you say that's really expanding the cloud, what does that literally mean? If you want to translate that to what does that do with applications available for companies or data storage, what does that particular section mean for you?
Well, for me personally, it's a bit like the Apple shopfront, where you can go and you can develop your own apps. I think what Facebook has done through OCP is by giving everybody the ability and the background, you can now easily piece together what a network will look like, no matter what size it needs to be. So therefore, far more people across the world, whether it's people in the supply chain or people who are building the data centers, have a more cohesive view and a harmonized view on how their data center infrastructure should look. So what I mean by that is it's actually accelerated the growth and deployment and number of instances. It's made it easier, I think, for people to have their own instances of cloud.
Yeah, and also this whole model and scalability, it also removes a lot of complexity, because the levels of automation and self-provisioning they've built, the basis for, allows us to build an operating system that's doing a lot of error checking. So operator errors, which is the main cause of trouble in networking, they're greatly removed by doing a lot of sanity checking on whatever commands you like to issue on the network. If you have the appropriate level of automation, you don't need rocket scientists, which are really hard to get by in those days and age, to build the network. So if you really use the brains of networking equipment and sophisticated automated software, you can remove a lot of complex jobs, which are vacancies that are really hard to fulfill.
Yeah, I think that was clear in the previous panel right before the lunch. There was a big topic there on scarcity of resources. Let me just have a look around the room if there's any questions around for these two gentlemen. Yeah. You wanna?
Hi, I have a question. How do you look at 5G?
Was that clear for the room? So the question is, how do the gentlemen look at 5G?
Yeah, for us, it's one of the many applications. For Pluribus, 5G is a very crucial development because our biggest OEM partner customer is Ericsson. And we are being deployed in 90 of the 120 mobile networks that they build around the world. The complete underlay is Pluribus based, and we see every time more functionality is moving to the edge. 5G is typical in an application that most needs a lot of compute in the edge, and you need really very strong and secure capabilities to slice networks for all the applications you need in the edge. And that's the exact foundation that we provide to Ericsson, but also to other customers.
I'd agree. I see 5G as the future of networking. Obviously, at Commscope, we work with many of the service providers, the big service providers who will be rolling out 5G. How do I see it? I see it as being an open platform. I don't think that service providers are going to invest in switching hardware from vendor A and vendor B. I think I see them going towards OCP, white box technology, as you just mentioned, open platforms. So I see 5G technology enabling IoT devices, and I think it's going to be open, and it's going to have, again, a physical infrastructure that can support any protocol running over it.
Okay, I think that answers the question. Anybody else? Any questions to these two gentlemen?
Well, the beauty of 5G is that it's all Ethernet and IP based. And the current mobile networks, they're completely software based. And in most cases, it's indeed disaggregated hardware where chipsets from Intel and from Broadcom are being used to fire up equipment.
I think one of the challenges with 5G is you think that every cell site being a 5G-enabled cell site, you think about KPN, Deutsche Telekom, China Mobile, how many cell sites they have, it's going to be huge. So having the ability to manage physical infrastructure at those remote sites is going to be huge, because many of the cloud companies I've worked with have, they value money, obviously they have deep pockets, but what they don't have and what they can't buy is time. So being able to remotely manage physical infrastructure at all those locations is going to save on time investigating if ports are available and free, diagnosing hardware issues. I think that's going to be critical as well, because otherwise you're going to have somebody in a van go into a mobile site, and that's time consuming, and that's what we can't buy is time.
Perfect. Hey, just to round it up, we mostly have people from data centers in the room. If you would give a recommendation to data centers where to watch for the next coming period, what would it be?
Well, from my perspective, it's going to be 400 gig, 800 gig, 1.6 terabytes in the fabric between the leaf and spine switches. We see that. That is a hot topic, amongst the hyperscalers and the cloud providers. And I think also as well, as an add-on to that, is going to be 5G technology and how that enables our lifestyle, but also how that generates data that's going to come back to the core data centers. Be prepared for that. Have your physical infrastructure right the first time.
Okay. For your perspective, just more.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and I can concur to that. It's going to grow further. I think a greatly underestimated aspect of data centers is the energy efficiency of data centers. Currently, there's a lot of focus on the brute consumption of a data center, but there's little attention for the fact that the energy efficiency of a data center is much better than all those PCs that were distributed amongst office areas. So the consolidation of server storage and networking in highly specialized data centers is a lot more efficient than all that distributed compute power in the old-fashioned networks. So that will only increase. East-west traffic will increase. And capacity demand is going to increase.
And just one last thing. I knew I should have had my notes. For 2 years, I've had my notes next to me. Sustainability. That is absolutely key, and that's a big thing we're working on as well.
Sure. Cool. Okay, I would like to close it off with this. Gents, thank you very much for sharing your thoughts on this topic. It was a very broad topic, but I think we managed to brush on most of the things. I think it's difficult to bring a conclusion on the topic in general, given the broad statement, but I really appreciate you sharing your views, mostly on how data centers should organize and how connectivity towards other edges and other locations should be organized. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
A warm welcome.
Thank you.